everyone, and welcome once again to the Temple Institute Parsha class. My name is Gedalia Meyer, and I'm podcasting from Ma'ale Adumim in Israel. Time is one of those weird animals that we all know about and all live within, but none of us can really put our finger on to clarify what it is. It's like that old saying from Augustine of Hippo, "I know exactly what time is until you ask me to explain it to you." In the 1600 years since he said that, we really haven't advanced an explanation. We've come up with all sorts of scientific verbiage on the relative nature of time, the second law of thermodynamics, and who knows what quantum stuff. But at the end of the day, we still don't know what time is. We are fully aware of such fundamentals about time as the way it seems to pass slowly at times and faster at others. This is as obvious as, well, the passing of time. We are thoroughly conscious of the aging process and all the rest of the evidence that time is always making its inexorable path towards the future. We have all manner of clocks around us at all times. We have watches and chimes and smartphones and alarms and digital things that keep track of hundredths of a second. We have always had the heavenly bodies, the sun, the moon, and even the stars to help us keep track of the passing of time. We no longer really need them for this essential purpose, but it's nice to know that they are still there, ticking away and reminding us that the days and the months and the years are passing by. Do we really want or need these reminders? Wouldn't life be better if we didn't have all these things telling us constantly that we are aging and slowly making our way towards death? Perhaps the superficial part of the mind would prefer this, but the deeper part knows that this would only be hiding ourselves from the truth. We have to be cognizant of time's flow. It is part of being human. Without it, we are mere objects hurling aimlessly through time and space, not knowing where we are going and not even knowing if we are going. With it, we are human beings, the single known thing in our universe that has the innate and intense awareness of this most fundamental dimension of reality. Time gives us the most glorious of our literary expressions. It enables us to create music of the most sublime and profane forms. It keeps our intertwined personal lives forever on more or less the same page. It gives the journey through the mazes profound meaning and purpose. To know that the clock is ticking is to know that one is on a path. The deepest paradox we encounter in the mysteries of life almost always involve time. What could be more mysterious than some time-defying excursion back into our past or forward into our future? We would meet ourselves or something resembling them, and all manner of things would go askew. Our entire notion of freedom of choice is rooted in the nature of time. We have it because the future is not entirely mapped out. We have been given the wherewithal somehow of charting our own course to some degree. It's like we've been granted bits of time to use in our own way, our own little piece of reality to create like a god. The truly amazing thing about all this is not the amazing nature of time. It is that we rarely, if ever, take the time to notice any of this. We take it for granted, like the bottle of soda we get when we order a pizza. It's just there waiting for us to use and discard without a moment's thought or reflection. We are severely shortchanging ourselves in this ignorance of the wonder of time. Reflecting on time is our ticket out of the mundane sameness of this world. It is our passport into the realm of the divine, of eternity. Sometimes we wake up and briefly realize that a significant passage of time has taken place. It may be an hour or a year or a few decades. We suddenly become aware that all that time has gone to where we don't know, but it's just gone and there is no way of retrieving it. It is too bad that we only really appreciate the most wonderful of wonders when we no longer have it. But then it's too late and we sense that something precious has been lost. This week's Parsha is called Chukat. That word means law of, or something along those lines. It is an opening to a relatively long description of a somewhat complex ritual called the Para Aduma, or red heifer. This is an entirely red-haired cow that has a particular use in a kind of purification procedure that makes about as little sense as anything in the Torah. The cow has to be killed and then burnt to ash. The ashes are then mixed with a few other things and placed in a container of pure spring water. The water is to be sprinkled upon anybody who has become impurified through contact with a corpse, the most drastic form of ritual impurification. It is only with this mixture of cow ashes and the other things that this purification process can happen. As bizarre as all this sounds, it is right there at the beginning of this week's Parsha. This is considered to be an eternal law, despite the fact that we no longer have access to the whole procedure. These pure red cows probably come up every once in a while, and all the other stuff is perfectly accessible. The procedure itself doesn't appear to be particularly complicated. It doesn't even require the presence of the temple or the Ark of the Covenant or any of that. It seems like we could get this whole thing going tomorrow if we really wished. We just haven't, and it's been that way for almost 2,000 years. This section of the Parsha begins with nothing earlier prompting it. It is just there, apparently out of left field. Not only that, but when it is finished, the next subject seems to have absolutely nothing whatsoever to do with it. The Parsha just gets right back into the narrative of the journeys through the wilderness, like this red heifer interruption was some kind of commercial break. The next verse has everything set out in the first month of some year, and the Israelites on their way through the Zin desert towards a very biblical sounding place called Kadesh. This whole region was probably somewhere to the southwest of the famous Dead Sea. It is pretty desolate there now, and it probably wasn't much better 3,000 years ago. At Kadesh, things start happening. First, Miriam, the sister of Moshe and Aaron, dies there. Then the entire community has no water to drink, a not unlikely possibility out there in the middle of nowhere. A whole thing happens with Moshe hitting a rock and water springing out and then being taken to task for it by none other than God. It's a lot to happen right after the timelessness of that thing with the cow. From there, things move on to the subsequent journeys through the eastern spine of the Holy Land and the rest of this book. There is something quite interesting about this transition from the red heifer to this journey through the desert. It's not so much what is said, but what is not said. The verse immediately following the red heifer verses reads, quote, "The entire assembly of Israelites came in the first month through the wilderness of Zin, and the people dwelt in Kadesh, and Miriam died and was buried there." When exactly was this? All we have is that it was in the first month, but we have no idea what year. It turns out that there is a hidden gap in the chronology of the Torah, right in between the last verse of the red heifer and this verse right here. There is nothing in between them, but that time gap is quite long. It amounts to about 39 years. The only hint we have to any of this is an obscure verse in the book of Deuteronomy stating that they stayed in a place called Kadesh Barnea for, quote, many days. That could be anything from a few months to 39 years. Kadesh Barnea is traditionally placed somewhere around the current border between Israel and the Sinai Desert. This was where they were holed up for all that time. The wilderness of Zin is somewhere in between Kadesh Barnea and this other place called Kadesh. That journey took place after the hidden 39-year gap in time. The years are simply skipped in the Torah, presumably because nothing of note happened. It is quite amazing if you think about it. The entire period from the burning bush until the end of the Torah is about 41 years. 39 of those years are basically missing from the text, stuck in between the end of one verse and the beginning of the next. The narrative prior to this dealt with the Exodus and the various problems along the way, like the spies and the rebellion of Korach in last week's Parsha. Right after this, it goes into the subsequent journeys along the way, various battles and the conquering of land, the entire book of Deuteronomy, and the death of Moshe. All of that was a small fraction of the total time that comprises the final 4 books of the Torah. Almost all the rest was in this space between these 2 verses. Where did the time go? It was just skipped like it never happened. But it was 39 years. It doesn't even get a word devoted to it. Aside from the simple oddity of this being an easily missed feature of the text, something else here that may be of more personal interest. The Torah, when explained beyond its traditional scope as a history of the ancient Israelites, is meant to be a microcosm of our own lives, even though we live in completely different times and places. Somehow its message still reverberates today. What can we get out of this mysterious gap in time? Where does the time in our lives go? One day we wake up and we are teenagers. Another day we wake up and we are 30-something and well on our way with career or marriage or family. Another day goes by and we are middle-aged. We wake up again and we are old, and many of those whom we have loved are gone. I turned 64 yesterday. Where did the time go? It just flies by like a dream. We wake up and all those years are simply gone. Where did they go? I look back on my own life, my wonderful 35 years with my beautiful wife, who died 2.5 years ago, and I wonder this same question. I wouldn't take back those years for all the money in the world, but I do wonder where the time went. We all do this, whether we want to or not. Sometimes when we reflect back, it seems like somebody skipped some pages in the book and we ended up where we are and wonder what happened to those years in between. They are like the space in between those verses. They happened, but they weren't written down. This may be a blessing and it may be something that we feel profound regret over, but there is no escaping the reality of time. Sometimes we notice it, and at others it flies by like a fleeting dream. Shabbat Shalom.